Hi, Paul Pugliese here with the University of Georgia Extension. Today we're on site looking at a backyard vegetable garden, and we're looking at some problems here in some vegetables that we got a call about this week. It's actually something that I get a lot of calls about almost every week. I'm getting a few calls in the summertime, especially early summer, with problems that we're seeing showing up on vegetables. This particular problem is actually not an insect or a disease. If you look behind me, there's several tomato plants here that look kind of stunted. The leaves don't look really full. There's obviously something wrong here. And in this case, we like to look at the pattern. Every tomato plant in this garden is affected by this problem. So what is causing this? Well, unfortunately, this is a textbook example of what we call herbicide injury. And there's a lot of different types of herbicides that can cause this type of injury on vegetables in our garden. Now, there are different ways that herbicides can show up in a garden. One, of course, would be drift. If the lawn or a pasture nearby was sprayed with a particular herbicide, you could get some drift over onto the garden. But that's not the case here. We know there were no herbicides that were sprayed nearby. That was one of the first questions that I asked. In this particular case, we see herbicide carryover. And that carryover is actually showing up in either grass clippings or compost, a lot of times manure or even hay that's put into the garden as a soil amendment. In this particular situation, the client actually got manure from a local farm, and that manure actually has herbicides in it. Unfortunately, they weren't aware of this. When they got the manure, they used it in their garden as a soil amendment, which is a great thing to do. But a lot of people don't realize that most of the hay and most of the pastures that are grazed for animals like cattle and horses are sprayed with these herbicides that can actually carry over and still be active even in the manure for months, sometimes years after they've been applied. Now, these herbicides, interestingly enough, are very safe to use around animals. We use these in cattle and horses in their pastures, and there's not really any concerns there as far as animal toxicity. In fact, a lot of these herbicides you can spray and graze without any concerns as far as the livestock. And that's why they're such a popular herbicide. These are very selective herbicides. They only kill broadleaf plants. Things like tomatoes and okra in your garden would be very sensitive to that. It does not affect grass, though. These are selective herbicides that can be sprayed without hurting grass in your pasture. In this particular case, you can look behind me, there's some corn planted here, which corn is actually in the grass family and is not going to be affected by these herbicides to any great extent. Now, the next question is, will these plants recover? Unfortunately, in this situation, that herbicide will continue to be in the soil for quite a while. Depending on the chemical, that could last for a few months. Some of the common chemicals like 2,4-D might only last for 3 to 6 months. Some of the stronger chemicals like dicamba or picloram can last 6, 12, maybe even 18 months in the soil after that manure was applied. So it all depends on which herbicide was used here. A lot of clients want to know, can we test for that? Yes, we can send a soil sample off to the lab and test for it, but it's a very expensive test. It may cost $200 to $300 to test for that particular chemical. And that's not usually very practical for a garden like this. So what do we do about it? Well, in this situation, the best thing you can do, unfortunately, we can't take it out of the soil once it's there, but we can watch it. So wait about 6 months, come back in and plant a couple more tomato plants and just watch them. They're a good indicator of what's going on in that soil. And if you continue to see these types of symptoms showing up, then we need to wait probably another 6 months, maybe another 12 months, and come back and retest with some more plants. So that's the easiest way. It's cheap to do that. That only costs you a few bucks to buy a new plant and replace that as a test. These herbicides will break down with time. They break down in sunlight, believe it or not. So photodegradation is what causes these to break down. And eventually they will break down. There's nothing you can really do to accelerate that breakdown or get it out of the soil, as I said earlier. So again, it just takes time. So one of the things that we should learn from this is to be very careful about what you put in your garden. You want to actually, avoid manures in most situations. Even if you got manure from let's say a stable owner with horses, and they say, oh, well, we don't spray our pasture. Well, they may not know that they're buying hay from another farm that's spraying that hay field, and they're buying that hay and feeding it to the horses. So a lot of times they don't even know that they have that issue. So it's very important to probably just avoid manures in your garden altogether. A safer option would be to buy bagged compost or manure at the local garden center that's already been tested and clean. Another option would be poultry litter. Poultry litter is not going to have those herbicide residues because they're not grazing pastures or hay. And then another option would be, instead of using hay in your garden as a mulch, maybe look at using pine straw as an alternative. And that's actually a decent mulch to put in your vegetable garden as well. So again, if you ever have any questions about this or similar problems in your vegetable garden, feel free to call your local county extension office by calling 1-800-ASK-UGA1 and continue to follow us on the Georgia Farm Monitor.